Joliet,
Here.
Jackson,
Here.
Loops,
Here.
Kokendorfer, Nelson.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Next up, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. If there aren't any changes or corrections, do we have a motion to approve the minutes dated from February 3rd, 2022, and minutes dated from February 8th, 2022? Motion by Commissioner Loop, support by Commissioner Jackson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Minutes approved. Next up, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. If there aren't any changes or corrections, do we have a motion to approve our agenda for this morning? Motion by Commissioner Joliet, support by Commissioner Loops. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Agenda's approved. Next up, we'll move on to our first public comment of this morning. As a reminder, individuals from the public will have 3 minutes to speak on items that are related to the agenda. So at this time, I'd like to open up public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee this morning? Of course. Please make your way to the head of the table. Please state your name and community in which you reside in. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Kennedy. I'm from Lake Orion, and I've gotten to be a repeat customer here, I got to tell you. But when I see things like the commissioners claiming to own the parks that citizens own with all the language changed, I'm just so shocked that I can't believe this is the constitutional America that we've lived in our entire lives. The fact that this commission behaves like a fiefdom instead of a democracy is shameful. I do not agree with the clerk counting boards. We actually have canvassers in Oakland County, and so far it appears that Oakland County had 7% phantom votes in the 2020 election. That means votes that weren't any good. I think that comes to about 144,000, enough to flip the entire election. And that's just Oakland County. So to be authorizing fee schedules to have a centralized counting bureau for the ballots that were not quite properly counted to begin with in the election last year, because the Secretary of State refused to require them to do signature verifications on any of the mail-in ballots. So these are the facts that are out there, cases that have been closed but not even taken into consideration. So I do not want Oakland County participating as a centralized counting board, just like I do not approve of Coulter's 15-person public communication department that's been funded at the expense of our law enforcement. So I also see you've got another resolution for an additional 2% general salary increases in fiscal year 22. Now, first of all, I don't understand how last year, when 25% of the businesses in Oakland County, as of June, no longer existed, how this council approved 15% raises pretty much across the board. Even people that were getting grants came back and said, oh, we want to raise, everybody else got more money. Come on. This is ridiculous and wasteful, and this is the root cause of inflation. Got news for you. All these salary increases, all these extra people, why did Coulter need 399 more people in his budget last year? And that's his official page, 672-page budget. Why was that necessary? Yet the police, the sheriffs lost 20 sheriff, but they said, oh, well, you get 4 social workers, so you only lost 16. Nonsense. I'm not calling a social worker if I have a crisis. I'm calling my law enforcement. And it's offensive to me that this board has given itself over $4.5 million in discretionary spending for the projects that you see fit that do not reflect what the citizens of this county need and want is terribly offensive. And I'd be glad to help you go through the budget and see where you need to fix it, because I'm actually very good at financial analysis. And everything I've seen so far in this commission is disgraceful, because the
Ms.
public...
Kennedy, please wrap up your comment.
Thank you, will do. The public has a right to know how their money is being spent, and the public is only allowed to be taxed for purposes of defending the citizens and common welfare of the citizens. So everything they're spending on is in violation of the U.S. Constitution, Part 1, Section 8. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address the Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee this morning? Seeing none, our first public comment is closed. Next up, we'll move on to communications. Given that there are none, we'll move on down to item number 8, which is consent agenda. We've got 3 items under our consent agenda. Item A, resolution recognizing March 2022 as Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month in Oakland County. Item B, resolution recognizing School Breakfast Week in Oakland County as March 7th through the 11th of 2022. And item C, which is resolution recognizing March 2022 as Women's History Month in Oakland County. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Lubes, support by Commissioner Gershenson. Roll call or prompt the vote, please.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nays. Consent agenda approved. Commissioner Gershenson.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a shout out to Angela Powell, and I'm not sure who else was on that committee that made the decision to invite commissioners to highlight a woman this month in their district, and wanted to remind everybody to be sure you're looking at it for a woman that's had a big impact in their district.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Gershenson. Do we know if the deadline?
I don't.
Okay. So let's
I
get some
think
more
it's March.
information to communicate at both caucuses
Yeah.
next week for sure. That would be great. Thank you for bringing that to light. Next up, we'll move on to item 9, which is our regular agenda. Our first item is our presentation by our legislative lobbyist, Jim Ryan. So Jim, come on and introduce yourself again and give us a little update on what's shaking.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Morning.
Members, it's nice to see you. Well, it's good to be back again, and I do have some updates to give to you. Obviously, I think you're all aware of the fact that we're in the process of passing the state's budget this year. The overall sense at this early stage is the governor put forth her budget recommendations and wrapped all of the federal dollars into the state budget for a total of about $74 billion to spend this year, which is normally about a $56 billion budget. So it wasn't overwhelmingly well received by the Republican legislature. So anyway, it's been kicked off, and appropriations committees are meeting, and the budget process is continuing. And I think I mentioned to you the last time I was here that the unique situation we have this year with the new district lines for both the House and the Senate are creating a lot of chaos in terms of voting. Members are watching other members very closely in how they vote, because they might be running against them or moving into their seat or whatever. So we have an added difficulty this year that we haven't experienced in over 10 years. So that's going to complicate it, but by the same token, there is even greater risk, greater interest in getting home and campaigning, so that they can't do that until they get the budget done. One of the things, and stop me if there's a question as I proceed, please. One of the things that Chairman Woodward asked me to look into was speaking with Chris Ward at the Parks and Rec Department, as they were interested in whether or not there's going to be some funding available this year for any reason in Parks and Rec. Well, there is. There's a lot of money compared to the past available this year, and there's a 3-bill package, Senate Bill 702, through 704, specifically tapping out the natural resource fund, meaning fully funding it for, for a long time. And then and most of it goes to state parks, but then there's another bill, 703, introduced by Senator McDonald, which is going to offer $150 million in grants for local parks. So, in working with Chris Ward, we've got kind of a list we put together a list of priorities. So we're meeting with our legislators and asking them, get on the list for these grants. There are new grants that are becoming available for parks throughout the state of Michigan. So once that process gets started, it would be helpful if you would contact your legislator and say, hey, we'd like this bill to pass because we want to apply for some of these things. Jeremy Woodward's kind of made it a priority to get this done for me, so that's what I'm working on, one of the things. Second one I think I mentioned before is we're seeking a sponsor to increase the road commission from 3 members to 5 members. It's another issue brought to me by the chair. So I'm talking to members of the delegation to see who might be interested in working on this. That process is ongoing. I mentioned the budget with respect to the governor and legislators. The fourth thing here is there's a 2-bill package, Senate Bills 597 and 598. And this is a bill being pushed very hard by the Senate Majority Leader that would essentially privatize the Michigan public health system. So it would effectively neuter or destroy community mental health and put it all in the hands of the private sector, despite the fact that many communities throughout the state, counties throughout the state, are very pleased with the way their operation works. This bill has widespread opposition. Over 100 groups are opposed to this 2-bill package, including the Michigan Associated Counties, sheriffs. The list goes, I could read you the names, but there's over 100. And this bill may come up tomorrow. The bills may come up tomorrow on the Senate floor. And again, we're opposed to that, and we don't want to see it move. But again, it's the Senate Majority Leader's 2-bill package. So if he's moving it, he's of the opinion that he has the support for it. We kind of don't think he does, so we'll see what happens. But obviously, this is something that I'm not sure anybody in this room is in support of these 2 bills, but that was the fourth item I wanted to bring to your attention. So there, I'm done with what I thought you might be interested in. If you have other questions, I'm happy to take them.
Sure, excellent. Commissioners, any additional, Commissioner Joliet?
Hi, thank you. The Road Commission, I believed, received funding from from the state for the roads. Do you know if they did this last go-around? Infrastructure?
There's an infrastructure supplemental, which is being worked on as we speak. There's 4 major supplementals that are getting discussed right now. I think since the last time I was here, I think I mentioned to you that the first supplemental they wanted to deal with was healthcare, hospitals, nursing homes. Obviously, that was the most in need of attention. But there's also the infrastructure fund supplemental, the water supplemental, which is being debated this week, and could capture the 3 bills I talked about for Parks and Rec. That money, those 3 bills could be rolled in to the water supplemental. But the infrastructure one is important too because of all the dam problems we've had in the state. So they're on high priority. There's a lot of money. There have been some federal funds months ago that came through the feds for COVID relief. Those dollars did come to the Oakland County Road Commission.
They did, okay, they did
But these
receive.
are more significant. These are bigger,
Okay.
larger numbers. Does that answer your question?
So they did receive money last year?
Yes.
Okay, and they're possibly going to receive more funding this year that's being debated?
Yeah, the normal transportation budget will be passing this year with a lot more money in it. And additionally, There are a lot of federal funds under the ARPA funds that are be added to that, which are gonna come through, but the supplemental appropriation will do.
Okay.
So there's two pots. The regular transportation fund that we go through every year.
Right.
Spending gas taxes on infrastructure projects. And then the federal ARPA dollars is another very large pot that's gonna add to, well, infrastructure covers a lot these days. It's not just roads and bridges.
Right.
As you know, it's a lot of other things as well. So, yeah, there's two pots.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Excellent. Commissioners, any other questions, comments in regards to any items Mr. Ryan shared, or any other items? All right. Commissioner Jackson.
So, the two-bill community mental health package, you said it'd be going for a vote tomorrow?
That's the rumor.
Okay, and then, majority, leader, you feel as though, like you stated, he wouldn't be bringing it if he didn't feel like he had the support, but you don't feel as though he has the support. But at
Yeah.
the same time, can this two-bill package be vetoed?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah. It's first House bill, so it hasn't even been looked at in the House side yet. So it may get voted on tomorrow in the Senate.
okay, thank you.
And typically, the Senate Majority Leader doesn't put up a bill that he knows is gonna fail. So, we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner.
But it's great to see everyone, and you know, you're free to call me anytime. If you have any questions or need any information, I would encourage you to do so, and I'm happy to respond to you.
Jim, it's not related to any of the updates that you just gave, but I want to put this on your radar, and I definitely will be reaching out in the next couple days to give more additional insight. But one of the things I'd just like to put on your radar is as we start to approach our spring, summer months, we know that, throughout the pandemic, people found some more time in nature and in our parks, but also on our water. And I know that here in Michigan, not only do we have the most inland lakes than any other county in Michigan, but we also have the highest number of registered boaters in the state of Michigan. And some of us are aware, many of us aren't, but in regards to how much money Oakland County actually receives from the boater registrations is actually, I believe it's like 25 cents. And given that we do have the largest number of registered boaters and the most inland lakes, I would like to take a look at what are some things that we could start doing to maybe advocating. I know that there's been some efforts in the past to take a look at a different equation of the dollars that each county does get from the boater registration. I bring this up because I know many of you were and are aware that, last summer we had a lot of constituents reach out in regards to concerns of safety on our lakes. And what makes Oakland County even more unique is that Dodge Park, which is a state park, has a public access point. And that public access point is probably one of the, if not the crowdedest, the most busiest boat access point. And there's been lots of conversations and lots of concerns with constituents in regards to safety on our lakes. And so just given that I know that there have been conversations, I know I'm working with the Marine Patrol Division presently to take a look at how we can further ensure safety on the lakes via having patrols out on the lakes more, specifically in those lakes here in Oakland County that have demonstrated the higher need given accidents and incidences and 911 calls. But I definitely know when you take a look at, the broader picture that there is some things that are gonna have to, start at the state, and it's going to trickle down. So one of the things I just like to put on your radars, I would love to have and pursue a separate conversation in regards to what can we start doing and how do we utilize you to help us in those efforts.
Okay, that's a good question. I don't know if I'm assuming there's a formula that we distribute the registration dollars
Yeah.
according to. I don't know about it, but you gave me a heads up so I can look into it and be able to answer when you give me a call.
Excellent. I appreciate it. Thank
Sure.
you. Commissioners, any further questions, comments for Mr. Ryan? All righty. See you none. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining us. It's good to
Thanks,
see you in
everybody.
person.
Nice to see you too.
All righty, Commissioners. Next up, we will move on to item B of our regular agenda. Do we have a motion for the Clerk Register of Deeds staffing modification in the Clerk's Register of Deeds election division to continue two sunset positions? Motion by Commissioner Lutz, support by Commissioner Jackson. Good morning, Clerk Brown.
Good morning. And you all know Joe, Director of Elections. First of all, thank you for taking this up. I guess before we get into it, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of misinformation and disinformation, but I think it's important for people to hear facts about our elections. And signatures on absentee ballot envelopes are verified by local clerks and their staff. That is done when the ballot is returned and then entered into the program, so they know. And we have to have that information to see if we balance and all that sort of stuff. So that is all done at the local level. Michigan law is pretty clear as far as what tasks are for a local clerk to do, what's for the county clerk, what's the county clerk's role, as well as the state's role. A couple of years ago, 2021, I guess it was last year, right? Yeah. 2020, 21. Anyway, a new bill, a new law came into effect that allowed contracting between locals and county clerk to tabulate their ballots for them. We have had a tremendous positive response from our local clerks in us offering this. In fact, we have, in like 2 weeks, we're going to go look at another location for a possibility. We need more space because we have another large municipality that is interested in us tabulating their absentee ballots for them. So we are happy to provide this, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot, and especially being in another location, we have to have our staff there to lead the pod and everything else. So I appreciate that you originally created these positions. They were to sunset. We are asking for that sunset to be lifted so that we can permanently. This is not public comment time. Thank you. So that we can continue to offer this and partner with our local clerks who want it. We don't, they first ask us. We're not approaching anybody. They say, can you do this for us? And the fees that are incorporated, it's not a profit by us. We're still spending money on this, but we need to have some of these costs covered. We are hiring all the people to tabulate the ballots. There are Democrats and Republicans, for November 2020, we hired over 300 people. So the CARES Act money helped with that, but moving forward, we need this, and we need the staff. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Lutz.
I know initially Clausen said no, they weren't interested in participating in this program, but after experiencing the high number of ballots, looks like they chose to participate. So it is correct. It is a lot of work. Yeah. It's overwhelming. And for the one election, besides the city clerk and city clerk staff locally, working a number of volunteers who, like the rest of us, are aging. And it is difficult for each person. So I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Commissioner Joliet.
Thank you. I do, coming from local, I know the volume that comes in of the absentee ballots, and I know what my CVTs have had to hire and get volunteers to handle that volume. Mm-hmm. With that being said, they are specific times of year. There's not an election every year, so that's when they have to.
Oh, yeah, there is. There's elections. We have an election today, as a matter
Well,
of fact.
yes, I know it's in my district.
Yeah, so we have elections every year.
Every year there's an election.
Absolutely.
And so right now the election is specifically for my district only, I believe, in Oakland County?
It is the 43rd State House seat, so
Yes.
it is Lake Angela. I don't
Yeah,
recall
yeah,
the
so it's my-
boundaries.
it's my district.
So it's got to be somebody else's too, because it's bigger than.
Well,
Your
it would be
commissioner's seat,
part of
but,
Gingell's
yeah.
for Lake Angeles. But for, so these two employees that you've hired to sunset to help with the volume, what do they do during the times when there's not an election?
Oh, you want to touch on that?
Sure. So This was a resounding success in 2020 when we started, and we hired somewhere around 100 or so people in August, and as Clerk Brown mentioned, 300 in November. So these individuals have to be trained. There's constant touch points to make sure that they're still interested and staffing. We're performing this function 3 times a year in the odd years, 3 times a year, but sometimes 4 times a year in the even year, depending if it's a presidential year and there's a presidential primary or not. So essentially, as we ramp up for an election, say in May, as we ramp down with certification and any recounts, we immediately begin ramping into August. So it's a continual ebb and flow throughout the entire year. So these individuals are involved in training, recruitment, retention, all the payroll services associated with it, all of the public accuracy testing. There's a lot that goes into it on the front end. Legal notices have to be done and published. So they are responsible for managing those tasks. And then, of course, on Election Day itself, they're involved in managing what we call a pod, which is a room or location that's specific to a community or multiple communities. So we are now officially managing the largest AV board in the state. So we're larger than Detroit. We got rave reviews from Republican and Democratic challengers in November for transparency, for accuracy, and for timeliness. Because frankly, if you think about it, we counted over 100,000 ballots, closer to 130,000 ballots, and we're done and results posted online at 9 p.m. on Election Day. And so we've put a lot into making this successful, but it does take these 2 positions throughout the year to ensure that it is successful.
And let me just add that on top of that, for those who don't know, we are a passport agency, and that is in elections. And so all the election staff are federally certified passport agents. So that is another service that is happening on a daily basis. And I will tell you, it takes a long time just to process one application. So the more staff we have, that's more supported as well.
I didn't know you guys did passports.
We do.
One other question. So since this is somewhat of a federal or an unfunded state mandate to do the absentee ballots from the bill that went through, do we receive any money from the state to hire or to accommodate the extra absentee ballots, counting, vetting?
No, and that's why that fee schedule is in there, that we did when we had the original resolution, is to recoup some of those expenditures from the locals that they would be spending anyways, right? So we're not charging them anything that they wouldn't have been spending, it's just we're spending it on their behalf, and so they are reimbursing us for those.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions or comments? Alrighty, see none. I would like to say, Madam Clerk and Mr. Rosell, who's our Director of the Elections, I do appreciate the important work you do ensuring accurate and transparent elections. So first and foremost, thank you for the work that you do. As you've already shared, the demand for these services have not decreased, and I support this staffing modification resolution for sure. So thank you for bringing it forward. Commissioners, any other additional comments, questions? Madam Clerk?
I just want to add one
Absolutely.
thing. So I just want to remind everybody that, after every single election, there is a canvass that is open to the public. Anyone can come and observe. The Board of Canvassers, as you know, Commissioners, are chosen by you, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And it really is an in-depth process that not every state does after an election, and that canvass has to be done before we certify any race. So that's part of the process, and then after that, we still participate in 2 different kinds of audits in Michigan. Oakland County was part of the pilot program for the procedural audit, where we are hand counting ballots, where we are looking at the electronic poll books. I mean, it's another in-depth look, and then on top of that, the risk limiting audit. So I just want, not every state does what we do, including the testing before which there's a public accuracy test in every community that are testing their equipment before Election Day. We've been doing ours, and I've invited the media so people can see it. It's been on the news. And it's a very open and transparent process that there's so many opportunities for the public to observe so that they can learn how our elections work and really the accuracy, security, and fairness of them. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Seeing that there's no further discussion, please prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much,
Thank you.
Madam Clerk and Mr. Roselle.
Thank you.
Next up, we'll move on to item number C, which is Human Resources Collective Bargaining Agreement Fiscal Years 2022, 23, 24, and 25 with the Michigan Association of Public Employees for non-supervisory employees in Children's Village. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Loop, support by Commissioner Joliet. Good morning. Is that April? Good morning, April.
You guys had a couple meetings without me. I'm feeling a little like
It's good to see you.
So what you have before you is a new union, but not new to being a union. So it used to be GELC, which was the Governmental Employee Labor Council that is in the Children's Village. And they went and changed representation during this year. And so they are now Michigan Association for Public Employers. So you'll see that's a little different, but same people, same unit. So nothing much has changed, or nothing too crazy has changed. We did give them a new updated contract based on some of the MAPE requirements or requests, and all have been vetted by our labor attorney. But highlights of their agreement were a couple of adjustments for classification, still kind of part of the comp study and things of that nature. You'll notice that they have a 4-year contract with 2% each year with the MEALSO, and in their last year, 1% with the MEALSO. We adjusted some of their assignment pay for some more of the youth that need more special attention, so that they would, they have special skills that are needed for that particular area. And then we have some comp time adjustments that we had made in all the other contracts. They agreed to the healthcare plan that we discussed prior to help with some cost control. And then we have clarified and confirmed that we also will reimburse all of our employees for any certifications and education that they need to maintain those. And then update on some uniform costs for their nurses. So again, very collaborative negotiation time, and happy to have MAPE on board and working with the team.
Excellent. Thank you, April. I appreciate a couple different things within this document. The first one is I really do appreciate the consideration and actually moving forward with the extra hour or the extra dollar for premium pay. As many of us know, I know Commissioner Loops and I, given the field that we do work in, there is a lot more success with employee retention when you do have some additional compensation, especially when you are working with more difficult individuals and also to your high risk. So I can appreciate that on so many levels. And the other piece that I really appreciate under the benefits is the reimbursements. As we all know, professional development and continuing education credits is a large part of professional licenses. So I significantly appreciate that because it is not cheap. And I know each field has different numbers and requirements, so to see $250 to help offset that cost, I couldn't support more, so I appreciate that. Commissioners, any other questions, comments in regards to this item? Commissioner Joliet.
And I echo Commissioner Nelson's comments also. Yes, I know that the volume of kids that they have at Children's Village right now are quite special needs and require a lot of attention. Just one quick question. I noticed for the contract for wage increase for 2022, it looks like youth specialists too and the first cook receive a 4% wage increase. Why is theirs different than the 2%?
Yeah, we were doing some recalibration with wages when every year we do new contracts, we make sure that they're meeting the compensation of the market. And so those two positions needed an adjustment.
Okay, were they also part of the compensation? Well, that was union? Okay, they were, okay.
Yeah, so it
All
was
right.
still kind of left over from we did some of the union recalibration last year, and some of it's still kind of carried over to this
Gotcha.
year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner. April, I do just have one additional question. I did note, from my understanding, there's approximately 120 employees, and there's currently 20 full-time positions that are vacant. What efforts are being done right now to try to fill those vacancies? I know it's a tricky time right now across many different sectors to hire individuals, but what are we doing at this moment to help fill those vacancies? Because it's so important,
It
as I'm sure
is.
we all know, especially at Children's Village.
Well, actually, to Commissioner Joliet's comment, that was some of the reason why we raised the position, the percent for the youth specialist and first cook, is they're one of our lower paid employees, as well as we're working with Michigan Works and veterans as well to try to get people engaged in that, as there is not there's not a huge education program that is it's a lot of CEUs and credits, but not necessarily having to have a bachelor's degree of that nature. So we're focusing on some of those, and then just everything that we possibly can, as everybody in America right now, it's crazy. But that was actually one of the catalysts for our youth specialists are actually our boots on the ground folks within that department. And so they're very critical to what we do. And so it was really important that we had good and fair competitive wages to get them in the door.
Excellent, thank you. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, roll call, prompt the vote, please.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, April. Next up, we'll move on to item number D, which is Parks and Recreation, resolution approving the Oakland County Parks and Recreation 2022 rules and regulations. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Joliet, support by Commissioner Gershenson. And I believe we've got Melissa with us this morning. So good morning, Melissa. Oop, Melissa, we are unable to hear you. I see you're off mute.
Yeah.
But we are not able to hear your audio.
All right, is that better?
It is better. Good morning.
Okay, sometimes I have to turn it off and turn it back on.
Sure.
Okay, yes, so this is the annual kind of re-look at and reapproval of our park rules and regulations. There are no significant changes to the rules for this year, no structural changes to what we're doing and what we're enforcing. This was really an opportunity to work with Corporation Counsel to do some language cleanup and some sort of consolidation and reorganization so that things flow a little bit better. So nothing really notable to point out, except unfortunately I did notice one small error this morning. So if we could ask for approval this morning with one slight correction, in section 11, number 5, that talks about e-bikes within the parks. It should be class 2 and 3 e-bikes are not allowed on the park trails, and the class 2 somehow accidentally got deleted. So class 2 and class 3 e-bikes are not allowed on our trails, but class 1 are.
Melissa, can you give a definition of those bikes? What is the classes?
I can, yeah. So there's 3 classes, and we follow the same rules that the DNR and the Metro Parks follow, just for consistency. But there's 3 classes of e-bikes. Class 1, essentially you have to be pedaling in order for the throttle to kick in, and they max out at 20 miles an hour. So that is what we allow across the park system. Class 2 doesn't require you to pedal in order for it to go forward. So it essentially just is operated with the throttle only. So a little less control, and they can go a little faster. So we don't allow those. And then class 3 is also pedal assisted, but maxes out at a higher speed of 28 miles an hour, which is a little fast for our park trails, so we don't allow those either. We do allow class 2 and 3 for persons with disabilities who need those to access our park trails. So that is built into the rules as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa. Commissioners, any questions or comments? Commissioner Gershenson.
So do we need an amendment to make that change, or is it considered can it be considered a typo?
can consider a typo.
Okay.
If, it might be better if you can send a corrected, or, you know, we'll correct it in Civic Clerk. We can help you with that.
Perfect. And sorry about that. I just caught it this morning and doing one last review.
Sure, no problem. Thank you for that question and clarification, Commissioner Gershenson. Commissioners, any other comments in regards to this item? Seeing none, roll call, please, prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries. Thank you, Melissa. As we move on to item number E, I'm going to keep you on the screen. Next up, on item E, we've got Parks and Recreation, contract renewal of candidate conservation agreement with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources for the eastern rattlesnake. I'm going to let you fill in that M word, Melissa, because I don't want to say it incorrectly. But do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Lieb, support by Commissioner Joliet. All right, floor is yours, Melissa.
Great, thank you.
Masaga?
Massasauga.
Massasauga.
Yep. We just say EMR. There are a lot of acronyms in this. I apologize for that, but so this is the renewal of essentially our certificate of inclusion with the DNR's candidate conservation agreement with assurances. That's that CCAA that you see in there. Essentially saying that we will continue to apply with our Eastern Massasauga Rattlesnake Implementation Plan, otherwise known as the MRIP, which essentially just talks about the different ways in which we manage our lands, the times of year that we do things, the methods that we use to manage the lands, our best practices, and essentially ensures that as long as we're following along and doing what we said we were going to do on our managed lands, it essentially keeps us out of trouble with the DNR and U.S. Fish and Wildlife if we accidentally take or kill a Massasauga rattlesnake while we're doing that maintenance of our property. So it's a good thing. We have been in it the last 5 years. This is just a renewal. The only change that's different this year is we did acquire a few years ago 2 small parcels up at Addison Oaks, I think totaling about 4.5 acres, that we're adding to the MRIP to make sure that they're included should we be doing work on those lands and accidentally take a rattlesnake. So that's the only change. Otherwise, it's all exactly the same.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa. Commissioners, questions, comments in regards to this item? Alrighty, seeing none. I do have one question, Melissa. I read in there that the breeding populations of snakes are confirmed at 2 of our parks. What parks are those? As somebody who does not like snakes, it just gives me an additional heads up. So what parks have we identified?
So I'm filling in for Sarah Cook-Malin today, who's off on maternity leave, but
Sure.
I have Keegan from her unit on the call as well, and I think that he can probably answer that because I'm not actually sure exactly which parks
Awesome.
they
Thanks,
are in.
Melissa. Good morning, Keegan.
You know that offhand, Keegan?
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, good morning.
The 2 confirmed breeding populations are at Orion Oaks and Highland Oaks, but we also probably have a breeding population at Addison Oaks. That's just not confirmed.
Thank you for that clarification, Keegan.
We rarely see them though, so you are safe out in the parks.
I appreciate the assurance. Commissioners, see that there's no further discussion on this item. Roll call, prompt the vote, please.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nay. Motion carries. Thank you so much for joining us, Melissa and Keegan.
Thank you.
Next up, item number F, which is Human Resources, Resolution implementing the Salary Administration Plan First Quarterly Report for fiscal year 2022. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Loop, support by Commissioner Jackson. Good morning, Heather. Oh, no.
I'm here in person.
You are.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing this on the agenda this morning. So the report in front of you encompasses all of the salary grade review job studies that were conducted through December of 2021. And these were changes in job responsibilities that resulted from the VSIP that was offered last year. Departments had to readjust how they how they performed their responsibilities, and changes in department administration's restructuring. On this report is creates 2 new classifications that will impact 12 full-time positions, and changes to the salary grade of 4 classifications that'll impact 5 full-time positions. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Commissioner Gershenson.
Well, welcome. It's nice to see you in person.
Thank
Before we start, I just wanted to say I'm very proud of our team, Kristen, and your support, Mike Andrews, Amy, and Patty, in the depth of questions that you asked and sent out to all of us. And Heather, your responses were amazing too. Really appreciated it, because so many of us do not have an HR background.
Correct.
So it's very helpful.
Yeah.
My question is, the process of an employee putting in a request. What is that process?
So an employee or a department has the right to request a review of the salary grade or classification. And as part of that request, we ask that they give us information on what it is about their job that has changed since the last time it was looked at, and then we evaluate to see if there is significant enough change, and if so, we proceed with that study.
Okay, so it isn't just the employee request, there is an evaluation part.
Before we send out the job analysis questionnaire, yes.
Okay, well, that was helpful for me to understand, that there is a review
Correct.
of these requests.
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner, can I just ask a question off of the
Go
question
ahead.
that you just asked? So given that there is a review, does that review take place within the department, or is there another subgroup that reviews this? Or is it, once an employee fills out the document, does it go to review to somebody higher up within the department? Or does it go to a review for, like, is there a review committee? Or how is that, what happens next?
Yes, so if an employee is submitting a request, they send it up through their supervision and through their department administration, who then forwards it to the Human Resources Department, to myself or someone on my team. And we then review to determine if there's been significant change or if we might need a little bit more information regarding that, and that's, we determine whether the study should proceed from there.
Is there further confirmation that goes back to the department to confirm responses and getting more input and insight to make sure, did you represent everything that you're doing?
Yes, exactly.
And vice versa?
Yes, and if we have any questions on any of the information that was provided in the request, my team will follow up with the department, with the employee, just so we get a bigger picture, because these are very time-consuming studies.
Sure.
So, we don't want to take up a lot of an employee's time if there's no need to.
Excellent. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
That's okay. So I just wanted to finish up that I love that we give employees this opportunity, especially with the amount of employees that we have. It would be very easy to miss some definitions. So I'm glad the process is including input directly from the employees, but then that there is a check. It sounds like several checks, one with their team, and then your team, and then...
Yes, there is.
So,
even if it's a department-initiated request, we meet with the employee to go over their duties.
okay, very good. Well, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any further discussion on this item? Commissioner Joliet, followed by Commissioner Jackson.
I thank you. I appreciate all of these specific budgetary impacts, being at general, proprietary, and special revenue. That helps make things very clear. And I've been kind of learning more about the proprietary funds, and I see that you broke it down. It looks like a $12,000 impact in '22, and then a $21,000. And I'm assuming that those have been reviewed to make sure that those proprietary funds can handle that sustained.
Yes.
Going forward?
So that information is provided to us from Fiscal Services.
Okay.
So they go through the financials.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation today. And I just wanted to ask you, and it's concerning one of the new positions created,
local.
Commissioner Jackson, can you speak into the mic, please? I'm
okay.
sorry, thank you.
I'm always guilty of that,
I
so
feel
I
you.
apologize. It's the local administrator of the local business development position. So question about that, because, you know, I've been recently introduced to that operation and the rollout of it. This is the position that's going to be the manager of the small business facilitators that are going to be coming out to the
A
community?
little bit below a manager, but
Okay,
yes.
so this is a position to assist the manager?
Correct. It'd be
Okay.
the first line supervision of the team.
Okay, but it is a merit position, it is an in-house
Correct.
position, because I'm under the understanding that the facilitators themselves are not in-house positions at this time.
I would have to confirm with Ingrid on that.
Okay, wow.
There are full-time county employees that report to this position.
Oh, okay, this right here, this
Correct.
one. Okay, so would you say that there are other employees outside of the local business facilitators, the small business facilitators that are going to be coming out into the community that are going to report to this position? Is that what you're
Yes, there
saying?
are currently, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
asking because I know that whole operation is brand new and just trying to discern how it
Yeah, they
operates.
created it within their reorganization a couple years ago, so.
Thank you, I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gershenson.
Yeah, Heather, can you just explain to me proprietary funds?
I might
Or
defer
should I
to
wait till the next?
Mr. Jen to,
Because
for the
my,
next
he could
item.
probably, I can give you the,
Right.
you can wait till the next item if you want, but.
I think that'd be good, Commissioner.
Okay, because I
Let's wait till the
wanted to
next.
get an understanding of how grants were impacted.
okay.
Excellent
That's
question.
fine.
I think we'll learn a little bit more about that with our next agenda item.
That's fine.
Excellent, thank you. I know the one thing I just wanted to seek clarification on, I think I discovered the response, but it did throw me for a loop initially when I read the new classification of legal secretary to legal secretary. That threw me for a little loop, but I think I looked on the Schedule B sheet, and from my understanding, so it's basically just changing the classification of legal secretary to legal secretary prosecuting attorney.
Correct.
Is that, okay?
Yes, that is
It took me a minute to, I know staff was very helpful, because I'm like, what the heck is a legal secretary to a legal secretary?
Yes.
And now I understood that it was just adding prosecuting attorney and
Yes.
changing.
Yeah, their role is a little bit different than what we've seen of legal secretaries.
Well, I appreciate that.
In the market, so.
Confirmation, thank you. Commissioners, any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, roll call, prompt the vote, please.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries. Well, thank you,
so
Heather, for
much.
joining us this morning. It's good to see you in person. Next up, we have our final item, G, which is Human Resources Resolution for an additional 2% general salary increase in fiscal year 2022. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Joliet, support by Commissioner Jackson. This morning, we've got Mr. Kyle Jen with us and April, so good morning.
Good morning. I think I'm going to kick things off. I think this is the first opportunity I've had to appear before this committee, so appreciate the opportunity to present this item. Just to kind of back up and make sure we're all on the same page in terms of context, you'll recall last year as the budget was adopted, there was a general salary increase approved for non-represented employees of 1.5% for the fiscal year we're in right now. And then as April has been negotiating agreements with all our unions, for the most part, it's been either 1.5% or 2%, depending on, the option to take an additional 457 match, as that other 0.5%. So, that all happened last fall. I think as everyone's watched the news, we're all aware that, we've had a major uptick in inflation, at the end of last calendar year and continuing into this year. So we've taken a look at that, from a compensation perspective. as well as a property tax perspective. I mean, we know that the increase in inflation has ramifications for our employees in terms of their ability to, to pay their household costs. And from an employer perspective, from a competitiveness standpoint, we worked with you to adopt the compensation plan a year and a half ago to make our wages, more competitive with other comparable employers, and we want to make sure we're not losing a lot of ground there. Just for a few comparisons, the state of Michigan last October provided their employees an increase of 2% plus a 1% lump sum, and are scheduled to do actually a full 5% this upcoming October. Just as one point in terms of an employer that we compete with in some areas. In terms of private sector wages, private sector wage growth in Michigan last calendar year was 6%. And in particular, we've seen the automakers do large profit sharing bonuses, as obviously one of our major employment bases in the area. So with all that context, what we are recommending is an additional 2% base increase starting April 9th. So that would bring us to a total of 3.5% for the year for non-represented employees. April would be working with the unions to incorporate that, into amended versions of all their agreements, as well as the agreements with the unions that are still being worked through. So the cost there across all county funds for the current fiscal year that we're in right now is $4.25 million, because it only applies to the last 6 months of the year. As we go into next year, the cost would be $8.5 million above what's in the adopted budget for next year right now. If you take that down to just general funded employees, the cost this year is $2.7 million. The cost next year is $5.4 million. So, we've also taken a look at property tax revenues to make sure that this is affordable and reasonable. We're seeing significant increase in estimated property tax revenues for two reasons. One is inflation, because inflation, affects the amounts that taxable values can go up under Proposal A, and how much we can capture prior to any Headley rollback. And then we're seeing very strong taxable value growth, with the hot housing market. Last year, the data's come in with growth over 6%, for the assessments that will then be made this year. So conservatively, I'm estimating that property tax revenues will be $3.5 million higher than what's in the current budget for the current year, and $8.5 million higher for next year. We'll continue to look at those data and be bringing, kind of more official estimates to the Finance Committee next month as we kick off the budget process. But those are conservative estimates that we're comfortable with at this point. So, those amounts more than cover the general fund portion and leave some additional dollars to address, our ongoing structural issue to get that into structural balance, and so forth. So, we think this is a measured and timely response, for our employees. We'll certainly evaluate the economic trends as we're going through the budget process. Right now, we're budgeted for a 2% increase in compensation for FY23, but we'll make that evaluation, whether that needs to be adjusted as we go through the budget process. And then the last thing I would just note, which is also noted in the resolution, this only applies to union or non-represented merit employees. It does not apply to elected officials. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I do have a variety of different questions. So we've got Commissioner Lubes, Commissioner Joliet, and Commissioner Gershenson. So I'd first like to thank you for being here this morning to share this item with us and give us a little bit more insight. I'd first like to say that I am in no way denying the impact inflation has on individuals, especially during these times, knowing that inflation is at an all-time high. However, I am concerned with there being a disproportionate effect on proprietary departments, programs, and our communities. Before I go into, digging into some further questions, can you define what is the difference between proprietary departments and general fund departments? And I think you're probably going to throw in special revenue with proprietary, but specifically the difference between proprietary and general fund. Can you provide us that?
Sure.
little-
So, the general fund budget is what we tend to focus on in terms of making sure it's in balance, funded by property tax revenues and revenue sharing and other, sort of operational dollars. Our proprietary funds, in some cases, relate to the general fund, and in some cases are freestanding, but it's where we've got a specific set of operations and a specific set of revenue sources. There's really two categories of proprietary funds. So there's internal service funds, which is like our IT fund, our fringe benefit fund, where there's a specific set of costs. And those costs then get charged out to internal customers primarily. So, our IT fund then, charges each department for the IT costs associated with that department each year, through a combination of general fund and other, other sources that each department has available to it. The second category of proprietary fund is an enterprise fund, which is, designed to be self-supporting. So the Parks Fund is a proprietary fund. All of the WRC funds are proprietary enterprise funds. The airport fund is an enterprise fund. Those are all funds, where there's no or very limited general fund support, and they're designed to, basically operate like businesses in terms of being self-supporting. Special revenue funds are basically, external grant-supported funds, where you've got a grant and there's very specific, purposes, and, it's not tied in with the more discretionary or general operations of the county.
Excellent, thank you. So that kind of leads into my additional questions so first and foremost, I understand from the resolution, I believe it's the 7th, whereas it starts to break down the total estimate of the additional 2% increase and the effects that it has on the budget. Mm-hmm. I know that it's specifically talking more so in regards to the impact it has on the general budget, but my first question is, how will proprietary departments, special revenue, so our grant programs, there's a slew of grant programs from our health department to the prosecuting. I mean, we have so many grant-funded programs here in Oakland County. So my first question is, how will proprietary departments and special revenue programs and grant programs, how will they absorb the cost? And it's even more concerning that really, from my understanding, there's about 5.5 months doing this mid-year. So these departments don't necessarily have a full year to help offset some of the extra costs that are coming, because from my understanding, these proprietary departments are going to have to absorb the cost. So my first question is, how will these proprietary departments absorb the cost? I'm not talking general fund.
Sure.
General fund I understand, but I'm more honed in on proprietary and special revenue.
Right. I think the answer varies by fund. So for a couple key examples, the Parks Fund, is more than 50% funded by property tax revenues, so they will see the same impact on their property tax revenues that the general fund is seeing. So the proportion, should work the same as it is on the general fund, and I think will actually be a little more favorable because a lower percentage of their budget is compensation as opposed to the general fund budget. With the case of the WRC funds, I think they'll have to be looking at their operations as they work through their rate-setting processes. We did take a look at their funds. Across all of their funds, compensation only makes up about 20% of their costs. So a 2% increase in compensation is not a 2% increase in costs. It's actually, less than 0.5% in their costs. In terms of internal service funds, those are, there are also rates set there. There'll be a little bit of a lag because you kind of look back at past experience, so there will have to be an adjustment in those rates going forward. We're actually in the process now of talking to each of the owners of those internal service funds internally, taking a look at where they have room to make adjustments, or draw down fund balance over time if their fund balance is, is really healthy. Special revenue funds in terms of grants, again, it's a case-by-case basis. In some cases, I think that there will be room within the grants to absorb this. In some cases, we may have to provide a small amount of general fund to kind of cover the rest of this year. And then they should have the ability to build those costs into their grant applications going forward. So, I think overall, we think this is the right thing to do, for our employees, the right thing to do to stay competitive. And like all the other costs that the county faces, we're going to have to manage those costs within each of those funds.
Mr. Chen, is it fair to say, though, that proprietary departments will need to adjust other operating expenses and or make rate adjustments? That's a fair statement to make.
That's a fair general statement.
When we think about making rate adjustments, that could potentially be at the expense of taxpayers, right? I might guess that WRC is a good example, right? Because sewer and water and our drains, potentially that could increase the rates that we as residents who benefit from the services may have to feel out of our pockets. Is that a fair statement to make? That's a potential, because
it's a potential. I certainly don't want to speak for the water resource commissioners.
Sure, but that's just a small example. Bottom line is there's proprietary departments are going to have to be faced with making some adjustments, period, whether it's fiscal year 2022 leading into fiscal year 2024. It's fair to say that at this time, we know there's going to be impacts, but we just don't know really to what degree, because everything is projected. And then secondly, when I think about grant programs, again, is it fair to say that grant funds will need to review their operations to see if there's ways that they can absorb these extra costs? And potentially, an effect might be some program cuts within our grant programs. Again, it's a possibility. Is that fair?
Right. It's fair to say that they'll have to review their operations. I don't know if I'd use the word program cuts, in terms of a 2% increase, but...
Okay, I appreciate that. So that's the question I had surrounding the impact of not just departments, but also it trickles then into our communities. My next question is for the Sheriff's Office. We've just recently passed a 3-year contract with our Sheriff's Office. So will the cities, villages, and townships who contract with the Sheriff's Department, who's going to eat that additional cost? Is it going to be at now the expense of our local CVTs, or is the county going to absorb that extra cost, given that those 3-year contracts, I know that there's current negotiations happening right now with the sheriffs, but for the contracts that we've just passed for the next 3 years, who's going to absorb those costs? Our communities, or is Oakland County going to absorb that? And if so, is it coming out of the general fund?
Sure. So, some context there. Those contracts, as you're aware, were entered into and renewed late last year to take effect this year going forward. Because the contracts with the unions were open and are still open, we had to make some reasonable estimates on compensation, over the 3-year period. We worked with the Sheriff's Office to arrive at estimates that we were all comfortable with. We did actually assume a total of a 4% increase for this year as part of those estimates. So specific to this 2%, those contracts really already cover those costs.
So they won't be getting this proposed additional 2%?
They will get the 2%, and it's basically already covered in the contracts that are entered.
So are you
into right
referencing
now.
like placeholder? Because I know that there was communication sent out but in regards to this placeholder. And one of the questions that we did not receive a clarifying answer on is the placeholder at least 2%? Is it enough to cover these now additional costs for fiscal year 2022?
The placeholder was a 4% increase in the first year. So between, right.
So there is no additional cost that the county will have to pay, and there is no additional cost that our CBTs who contract with our sheriff's department will have to pay.
I'm going to take that. So we're in the middle of negotiation, which is hard to do when you already have a 3-year contract. So as of right now, we haven't negotiated that full contract. So if you were to keep everything status quo, then it's covered. It's covered, but we're still in negotiation. So there may be some slight adjustments or whatnot, but that actually won't take place until we go into negotiations.
So is it fair to say we don't know at
So-
this time?
Right, because we're still in negotiations, right? So their total compensation might be somewhere different or whatnot. So, but for the sake of argument, yes, we have a 4, 2, and a 2 for their total contracts for the next 3 years, and those are locked in. And so they would not, the cities would not get a new contract until 25, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Or 26. Does that make sense? Did I get it right? Okay.
Excellent. My final question is, why wasn't a budget amendment attached with this item? And I'm more concerned, really, yes, I have raised some questions that are of concern, but what's even more concerning is that there was no budget amendment attached to this item, and from my understanding, it's anticipated that a budget amendment will be provided in April. So could you help us understand why a budget amendment was not attached with this resolution first, please?
Sure. So, we have, obviously provided the estimates on what the total cost is going to be and ensured that those are balanced out by higher expected revenues. There is a lot of work that goes into a budget amendment that affects every personnel line in the entire budget. From a timing perspective, we thought, it was important, to provide this increase to employees now as they're facing the higher costs. And then B, as you may be aware, the financial side of the Workday IT system is going live in early May. So we wanted to make sure this got processed in the payroll system and didn't interfere with that go live. As we're moving all of our financial data and transactions from one system to another system. So because of the complexity of the budget amendment, there just wasn't time to prepare the whole thing. We'll absolutely bring that to the Finance Committee, with the next quarterly update and ensure that the budget fully reflects the impacts.
So is it fair to say that I'm hearing you say that because of a software implementation, this has led to the immediacy of this item being taken up in committee?
That was a factor.
Okay. With that being said, I'm going to move on down to, I believe, Commissioner Lubes.
Thank you. I want to clarify who the 2% is affecting. Sounds like with union agreements and addressing our part-time and seasonal employees, the only exception will be the circuit court judges, road commission members, and elected officials. So in effect, every employee will be able to utilize a 2% increase?
Yes. Can I comment on that question?
Sure.
So just for clarification, all of the union contracts that have been agreed to have a me also clause in or a me too clause, so those would be automatic. We are still in negotiations with the sheriff's unit and command and IBEW, and so I will use that as part of my parameters if that makes sense when we go into negotiation.
Excellent.
So with the exception of who you're negotiating with now, every employee will have that. So are there any departments then that would have to make a budget cut to make the 6-month raise happen this year? No. Okay. And last question, any consideration to utilizing this as a bonus versus a raise? Would that be more beneficial? And I want to say our staff are our greatest strength and assets in there.
Yes, so if I can come on in that.
Sure.
So a couple of things. One of the things that Kyle and I had talked a lot about is this just a moment in time where we have to kind of get through? But we're not seeing that. We're seeing that's going to be steady and that this is going to be somewhat the new floor, if that makes sense. So yes, we could do a bonus. It'd be a one-time adjustment, but then we will then continue to be behind. So what will happen is we'll start to lag behind the market, if you will, as it relates to salaries for retaining and attracting new employees. So that was the two questions that we kind of had. Is this just kind of a blip for a minute? We were watching it. That's why we're a little kind of waiting to see where that would go and how that hit taxable value and all of that kind of, bigger picture thing. And so we could do that, but then we become behind then. And so now we'll be playing catch up throughout the next few years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lubes. You did mention something in regards to like all employees. The one question I do have is noted in the resolution in the first now therefore be resolved clause. It's very specific of stating that the individuals who are included and excluded. I would like to get some clarification because the way the resolution reads in that now therefore be resolved clause, it excludes all other elected officials. And from my understanding, there are 6 elected officials who are included in this 2% raise, and I'd like to know why that isn't represented in the resolution.
I don't know who they
Heather, I believe Heather Mason made some additional
I didn't catch that, sorry.
information, and I would like to confirm that there are elected officials who are included, and I'll start there because if there's a difference, we need to.
That's correct. So in the fiscal year budget process, when the HR department brings forward the salary package to this committee to approve, the county executive doesn't make a recommendation as to the salary increase for the elected officials. That is reserved for this committee to make that recommendation.
But she's saying though that there's 6 in here that are.
So from my understanding, the 6 elected officials who would be getting this 2% increase would be the county executive, our prosecuting attorney, our water resources commissioner, our deputy clerk, and I believe the 6th,
The sheriff?
the undersheriff. Thank you. So those are the 6 positions that I'm aware of. And I just want to get some clarification because as the resolution reads as is, it makes it out like there are no elected officials getting or being a part of this 2% increase. And I would like to just make sure that A, we get clarification, and B, that is represented correctly and accurately in the resolution.
Okay. So what this now therefore indicates is that that these groups down here is the county executive isn't making a recommendation for those. You can write in a be it further or a whereas.
So I guess, staff, can we get some clarification? Because I don't,
Yeah, it's okay.
I hear the words
absolutely.
you're saying, but I don't understand it because it does, I still read the resolution as is it's excluding elected officials, yet at the same time, I believe there are 6 elected officials who will be impacted. So Michael Andrews, he's one of our amazing board analysts, so help us out here, please, Mike.
So, and I think they might get consensus here, is that I believe it's by statute.
Can you speak into the mic, please?
Yeah, I believe it's by statute that the Board of Commissioners has the authority to set the wages and rates of the elected officials under Act 139. What we have here, and what they're representing in the now therefore be it resolved, is that number 4, all elected officials are excluded in this 2% because of Act 139, which you will normally take up during the budget process at that time in September, where you will set percentage increases for elected officials. I think what you're referencing, Madam Chair, is that when we set out those questions to get some further clarification on the resolution, that there was a misstatement possibly in the answers that included 6 elected officials as a part of this resolution, but the resolution as it's presented to you is correct in that it would be excluded from the 2%.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification. So it does look like, I know, Heather, are you familiar with what we're referencing, the email? Because I believe you were the one who supplied the answers.
Yes.
And within that, it did make it out as if the LAGO committee would be determining 6 elected officials. So that is incorrect, right?
Correct.
Not necessarily.
And the reason why I just want to make sure we're getting the right information is because if it is a LAGO responsibility and duty, I want to make sure all committee members are aware of what our duties are. So please.
Yes, so again, LAGO would take that up, not at this time with this
Okay, so it'll be
resolution.
separate.
They would take it up during the budget process. So I think what was mentioned in the clarifying answers was that the 6 elected officials would be taken up by LAGO. It's just that we
At a
needed
separate
maybe
time. At a
additional
separate
language.
time.
Yes, that included during the budget process or something along those lines so that you guys could be fully clarified as to when it is that that gets taken up.
I appreciate
Yes.
that clarification. Thank you, everyone. So I'd like to move on now to Commissioner Joliet, followed by Commissioner Gershenson.
Thank you. All right, this is a lot of information. So if I have this correctly, there's 2 things we're trying to address here. Inflation and keeping competitive salaries. And this is somewhat being motivated by an excess in property tax, so we're able to pass this on. And I recognize that inflation and property tax. Coming from local, at the time the last recession hit, we were in arrears in the red because, as you all know, the Headley Amendment doesn't have a bottom. It just has a ceiling. And I also can appreciate the need for forecasting. It's essential, but nobody was able to forecast that recession that hit, the pandemic. And so I would also echo Commissioner Lubes in that I would much rather see a bonus structure. I see it would leave us behind, but as noted in your presentation, many private industry, or a lot of private industry is rather doing bonuses because you don't want to overpromise a payroll that you can't keep up, and you don't want to have to do a pay cut as happened in the recession, layoffs, that kind of thing. So for that reason, I can't support this because the Headley Amendment is real, and I've seen what it can do, and I don't want to rely on that as a revenue source. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Joliet. Commissioner Gershenson.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank you for explaining the budget pockets. And I'd love to request a sheet that we could have, that we could refer to. I'm very concerned about many of the grants that our health department is involved in because I work so closely with them. So I would want some sort of assurance that that many of their grants, which they're working so hard on in so many of the communities, that they would have the ability to come to us and say, we're short here, this grant won't continue, rather than the grant just being cut off. So I'd want some sort of ability for those agencies that are dependent on those grants, that are working in the community, to be able to say to us, we need help here, or the grant isn't going to be able to go forward.
Absolutely. We do have a current process and a small amount of funds reserved in the budget for what's called voluntary grant match in a case where a grant, doesn't cover a service that the administration, and the board deems to be critical. And we would expect to use that process for any cases, like the ones you're describing.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just comment, in terms of the economic downturn piece, we certainly are constantly keeping an eye on economic indicators. Last year we went through the process of revising the county's fund balance policy, and we're grateful to have unanimous support from the board in terms of revising that fund balance policy to strengthen it and make it clearer in terms of having a very, protected and healthy rainy day fund that would help us manage, through the effects of an economic downturn, and ensure we didn't have to make major, changes to employee compensation levels when and if that occurs. So, that's kind of our view in terms of overall budget risks is we're driving towards structural balance, true structural balance on our general fund budget, and protecting a rainy day fund that will help us manage through economic downturns.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Jen, in the beginning of the presentation, you gave us information about other governmental bodies that have gone through this initiative and percentages on what they are asking for. Could you just give me that information again?
Sure. So I think the two key pieces, the state of Michigan, again, last October for their employees did a 2% general increase with a 1% lump sum, so 3% total, and then are scheduled and approved to provide a 5% increase starting this October 1st. So that's kind of one key public sector comparison, and then across all the full private sector in Michigan, last year private sector wage growth was 6.1%.
Thank you.
Excellent. Kind of going off of some of the things that were just asked. So the county executive put together a budget task for departments with a 4 to 6% budget cuts, with the end goal leading into potentially 10%, right?
Yep.
By doing this cost of living increase, are departments going to be asked to continue to make even greater budget cuts in the future?
So, a couple things there. First of all, in terms of the projected increase in property tax revenues, we're not utilizing all of that for this 2% increase. So there will be, a portion of that revenue that can be applied, to closing our structural gap. Secondly, I think we're trying to take a balanced approach. If you go back to December of 2020, it was a 3-tiered plan, to implement the compensation plan, to offer the VSIP, and then to look for workforce efficiencies over time. So I think we're trying to balance, ensuring that we're staying competitive on the compensation piece. Obviously the VSIP departures are still occurring, and there will be a level of workforce reduction still needed, which we'll be evaluating during the budget process and working with you on, after we present our recommendation July 1st. So I think, in my view, and I think April would agree, this is part of taking a balanced approach to reduce our workforce, but also make sure we're paying them, competitive wages so that we can attract and retain the best possible staff.
Sure. So I appreciate your response. It was a lot of words, a lot of information, but it does still sound like we will be expecting departments to continue to make some cuts.
The plan is still the same.
Yes. So regardless of this cost of living increase, we are still moving forward with expecting departments to continue making budget cuts. Thank you. Commissioner Lubes.
Is it realistic
to vote on this after the union negotiations to determine that we can put that 2% in the union contracts?
You can on all of the ones that are not negotiated, because there's a Me Too clause in there already. So it would just be the sheriff and the IBEW. That could go on for another 4 to 5 months, so.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. At this time, I do appreciate April and Ken, you both being here to walk us through some of these things. I am going to recommend at this time, I'd like to make a motion to postpone this item until the next LAGO meeting. And the biggest reason why is I want to postpone this until we get a budget amendment attached to this resolution. This is a lot of money. There's a lot of forecasted amounts and dollars. And I really do believe that in order to move forward in making an informed vote, a budget amendment should be included. And I don't think that is out of the ordinary to ask that before a vote is taken, a budget amendment should be provided during that same time. So I am going to be making a motion to postpone this item until a budget amendment can be provided. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Joliet. Roll call.
Is there discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner. Open for discussion.
Okay, so I would like to understand the ramifications of a 2-week postponement.
I just, so the ramifications are different depending on what you're talking about. So doing a budget amendment is incredibly time intensive. So that is a little bit like when the comp study came, we didn't do that until we knew that there was support for that % increase. So it really it's really more about the time that it takes to then potentially have it voted down.
So you're
if that
saying
makes
a
sense.
2-week postponement isn't realistic because the budget amendment would not be ready in 2 weeks? I mean, I wouldn't want you to be rushing something that is so involved.
And two, this could come back in April, because I believe in the documents that have been provided to us, as far as, I'm sorry, the information that has been provided via notes from Heather Mason, is that it looks like this is all anticipated to be complete as far as a budget amendment in April. So I definitely don't want to risk rushing. But it does sound like things are already slated for April, so for me, that kind of just then would indicate that this would come back to the LAGO committee in April once that budget amendment has been attached.
Right, so I mean, I think there's a couple things here, one is the lead time, and I can't speak specifically to whether this potentially then delays the April 9th effective date, but if it's in committee in 2 weeks, and the full board to the end of March, it probably pushes us back at least a pay period. Again, there's the interplay, with the new financial system going live, which then potentially pushes it past that, and I'd have to map all this out with my team. We think the current timeline works. In terms of the budget amendment, again, our view is that we've clearly laid out the specific numbers in terms of keeping the budget in balance, so we don't have any concerns on that, and it just is a time-intensive activity to prepare the budget amendment, so we hate to do that prior to approval with all the other things that our staff has going on in terms of the, preparing for the upcoming budget process, and all the work they're doing to get the new financial system in order.
I appreciate and I understand that. I still am going to fall back to, I do believe it's incredibly disrespectful to bring this resolution forward with not a complete budget amendment. I mean, I just want to raise that as an importance. This is not something out of the ordinary in which I, as a chair, am requesting for any business that comes before. This is a big increase to our budget. This is a unknown impact to our proprietary departments and our special revenue departments. And I really just again want to emphasize it is not out of the ordinary to ask that a budget amendment be attached to a resolution that comes to committee to be voted on. I appreciate, I understand what you're saying. I'm sorry, I don't agree with it. So I will not move forward with supporting making a vote on this item today. I can't. I cannot make an informed vote without a budget amendment. Commissioners, is there any other discussion before we go into a vote to postpone this resolution? And point of clarification, do we need to give a date? Because I know that there's a differing, right? I mean, I could say 2 weeks, but I don't think the budget amendment will be done in 2 weeks. So do I have to attach a date to a postponement?
No, it can be a date certain or a date uncertain.
Okay, so I would still like to move forward. I made the motion to postpone this item to an uncertain date, support by Commissioner Joliet. Is there any further discussion on this item? Commissioner Lubes?
Want clarification again. So departments are or are not making budget cuts to make this happen?
They are not.
Okay, thank you.
General fund departments or proprietary funds departments?
Absolutely for general fund departments, absolutely for the Parks Department, and we will evaluate.
For the park, I'm sorry, did you say the Parks Department?
For the Parks Department.
Which is one department of many proprietary departments. Is that fair to say? Because we have IT, we have Water Resources Commission, there are grant programs. So it's not just parks. Parks may not be affected this fiscal year. But I do think it's honest and fair to say that there are departments who compensate their employees with proprietary funds that will be impacted in 2022 and 2023 and 2020 up and beyond.
I can't make blanket statements about a $1 billion enterprise.
Which is why a budget amendment would be great to help support some of the things you're saying. So I appreciate your words and I appreciate your time. Commissioners, is there any further discussion on this item? So I'd like to move forward with a roll call vote.
We're voting on the postponement?
So thank you for the clarification. We are voting on postponing item number. We are voting on postponing item number G, resolution for an additional 2% general salary increase in fiscal year 2022 for an uncertain date.
So what just prompted on our screen
Or you
was
can,
to,
yeah, I did prompt the vote.
but that's for the actual item, that's not for the
That's for postponing.
because it doesn't read that way.
Because I put the motion as postponed, but I didn't have time to add.
Can we do a roll call?
Yeah, I can do it.
Let's do a roll call vote on whether or not we will be postponing item number G to an uncertain date. So
Okay.
roll call, please.
Commissioners Gershenson,
No.
Joliet,
Yes.
Jackson,
No.
Lubes,
No.
Nelson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 2 yeas, 3 noes.
Motion fails. Okay, well, I appreciate, again, April and Ken, you coming forward and discussing this item, and we shall see where it falls.
Well, now we vote on the regular motion. Now we vote on it.
Thank you. Next up, we will now move forward with roll call vote or prompt the vote for item number G.
Did it come through?
Ooh, it's coming through twice, so is that?
Madam Chair, you have 3 yeas, 2 nays. Motion
3 yeas, 2 nays, motion carries. Thank you again, April and Ken, for coming forward to give us more information on this item. Commissioners, before we adjourn, Commissioner Gershenson.
Oh, okay.
Do you need to, we have a last public comment.
Okay.
So do you need to?
I need to leave. I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that our Commissioner Angie Powell was nominated for Best Under 40, or however it goes. So congratulations.
Oh, excellent. Congratulations. Before we adjourn, we are now moving into our second public comment. As a reminder, individuals have 3 minutes to speak on any area in which they would like. So I'd like to open it up If you'd like to come forward, please state your name and community in which you reside in. Good almost afternoon.
Oh, it is, isn't it? Gee, did I clear out the room?
Hey.
What happened here? Oh, that's a little disconcerting. So, first I want to thank Chair Nelson, because she has actually been standing up for what the people need to hear. Real facts, real budgets. It's offensive to me that you just turned around and voted this salary additional increase with no budget amendment. We have so many things that are being done so illogically that my business mind is going crazy, because everything you guys are doing is the opposite of what you should do to be successful. And I know, because I've done it from the ground up. I have personal experience in most of these things. In fact, I was one of the few in the country in 1987 that got 100% of my stock clients out of the market before the crash. So when I talk about finance, it offends me, and it's very concerning when I hear people that say the IT group is going to go live with all software. The reason they couldn't do a budget amendment was because of software implementation. And lo and behold, I've been involved with FOIA data to try to find out what in the world this county is doing, or shall I say United Way is doing, with our millions of dollars for mental health and well-being grant funds. It's scary. I need help reviewing it. There's so much data. The fact that they didn't tell the Grant Oversight Committee at all any of the application data from any of the people declined or applied is shameful. And the fact that we have no oversight in reality on the grant oversights in this county is why I'm up here day in and day out. I feel like it's a full-time job now. I'm retired. But there's too much inaccuracy and lies that are being circulated. And one thing I wanted to make sure to clarify, since our clerk, Lisa Brown, made it a point to call me out on something about the election that she claims is incorrect, I would refer you to Genetski, Genetski versus Benson, case number 20-216MM in the Court of Claims for the state of Michigan. The Judge Christopher Murray, who was appointed by Dems, by the way, ruled that Jocelyn Benson violated the Michigan Administrative Procedures Act regarding the all-important signature verification processes that are a part of Michigan's election laws, which are in place to ensure that one legal person casts one legal vote and only one legal vote is counted. We must point out that Christopher Murray was appointed in 2018. So it's not okay to sit here and say there were no issues. There were issues, just the media is covering it up.
Wrap up your
So
comment.
we really need to be opening our eyes to all what's going on in our state of Michigan, in our country, and the root cause of these is the policies that are being put forth that are creating the inflation that you're trying to spend more to cover up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address the Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee? Please state your name and community in which you reside in.
Yep. Sorry to do this, given
No,
the
good
overtime
morning,
you guys
good
are on.
afternoon.
I'm Teresa
Welcome.
Renault. I'm an Oakland County resident. And I just want to thank all of you for what you do. I understand this is a part-time elected position that you guys are committed to. And as I look at the 100-page plus packets that you guys are responsible for pouring over in preparation for these strategic committee meetings, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And it was evidenced today by Commissioner Nelson and, sorry, by all the work that you guys put into hold the resources accountable. So thank you for that. I got stuck last night, though, reading the Parks and Rec rules and regulations. So and here's what I found fascinating. This is an amazing format that could be used by the state of Michigan for election integrity, because if we just, looked at the fact that we've got dog licenses that are required, maybe we should make it a serious thing to have people have to show their ID. And then at the federal level, there's so many rules and regulations in here that promote lawfulness that I think it's a good thing. So this document actually has a million good things in it. What tripped me up, though, was I would call it bait and switch, but it's really search and replace that the legal department has done at some point in here, because we went from parks to commission property. So the commission doesn't have any property, you manage the property. But somehow the subtlety of this language shift sets it into the aura that somehow this is commission property. This is our property that you guys are managing. You're stewards over it. And I would like to see somebody hold the legal department responsible for doing a little bit better job. You see, it's really even inconsistent. Like you, I don't want to be reading these kind of documents, but I want to be able to rely on our legal resources to do the right thing. I don't want a decoder ring to have to understand this stuff. It needs to start getting more easy to read, and we need to be consistent, not sloppy. And I mean, if you just look at important violations of the park rules, there we go, it's the park. And then section 1, hours. No person shall remain on commission property. No, it's the park property managed by the commission. Fees and charges. No person or entity shall use any commission property. It's all over here. It's not your property. So we need to fix that, because we don't want your residents, your constituents to think that we're all of a suddenly transferring community property to the government. So thank you for that. Thank you for all that you do. I know it's a non-thankful job. You got a lot on your plate reading these 145 pages last night. And some of you are in another committee too, so that's a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address the Legislative Affairs Government Operations Committee during our second public comment? See none, I will close public comment. Commissioners, is there any other business to come before us today? See none, I declare the Legislative Affairs Government Operations Committee adjourned at 11:23 a.m. Thank you, everyone.